Hello, and welcome to the Law Deals podcast, where we discuss law firm succession plans, profitable law partnerships, and law firm purchases and sales. I'm your host, Ed Alexander. I've practiced transactional business law for 30 years, have my own practice, Alexander Business Law, and am a principal with Fitzgibbon Alexander, a business intermediary firm. We're on a mission to make sales of law firms commonplace so you can enjoy your practice and your life. Hello, and welcome to the Law Deals podcast. I'm your host, Ed Alexander, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Darren Wurz. Darren is the managing partner at Wurz Financial Services, where he serves as chief wealth counsel to law firm owners. He is the best-selling author of The Lawyer Millionaire, which was published by the ABA. Really nice feather in your cap on that one. And he also hosts the Lawyer Millionaire podcast, which you can find on your favorite podcast provider. The reason that I'm talking to Darren is because he is a specialist in financial planning for law firm owners. And in addition, he's a small business owner himself. He really understands what life is like as a law firm owner. So Darren is a CFP, and he also has the exit planning certification, which I look forward to talking a little bit more about. So I want to begin this with welcome, of course. Was there anything I left out?
No, you got it. That's great.
Good. Excellent. So Darren, why don't you tell us about your journey and how you became a financial advisor for lawyers?
Yeah, well, it's been such a fun and interesting journey. My family, there's been a lot of financial advisors in my family. My dad was a financial advisor, his dad before him. And, as a kid, I grew up around the business, got a lot of exposure to investing and that sort of thing. And dad always wanted me to come into the business, but, being the oldest of two, and by 8 years, I was very independent minded and wanted to go and do my own thing, So I decided I wanted to be a teacher. And the reason I wanted to be a teacher is I love explaining concepts to people. I love empowering people. I love seeing other people grow and achieve. And so I wanted to see kids just, do great things in life and be a part of that. So I did that. I went and got my degree in biology and taught 8th and 9th grade science for 5 years. Teaching was not exactly what I anticipated it to be. There's a lot more administrative work that you didn't know you were signing up for. And what I discovered is I'm a very entrepreneurial person. I love the idea of building a business. And so I just wasn't satisfied in that role as teacher. And so I decided to start my own branch of the family business in Cincinnati, Ohio, as a financial advisor, doing things the old school way, dialing for dollars and all that fun stuff. No clue how to start a business, no clue how to run a business, how to market, any of these concepts, right? So I'm self-taught in so many areas like that. I went back to school, got my master's degree in financial planning so that I could have a base of knowledge to draw from. But what I discovered is that it's very difficult to stand out as a financial advisor. And I can commiserate with a lot of law firm owners who become law firm owners, not necessarily out of choice. A lot of law firm owners ended up that way because they had to, right? There were layoffs in the economy, and so they had to go start their own shop. Or maybe they got into it because they thought there's going to be all this freedom and flexibility, and I'm going to, have all this free time and make all this money. And then they got the hard reality check that, oh, wait, I own a business now. And actually, there's more work.
I always used to say that if you're making exactly the same as you do working for somebody else, you're probably better off working for somebody else.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So let's unpack a couple of things there because I really like that story. Right. So the first thing is, sitting around the kitchen table while your parent is there talking about their job, it conveys an incredible amount of information to your kids. You don't realize it because you're just kind of having a conversation. But I see it with both my kids, one of whom has her own firm and just, had it ingrained in her while she was growing up. I mean, it's just that constant education.
Yeah.
The other piece that I wanted to talk about was I don't know how somebody who's entrepreneurial can exist within a governmental organization, let alone a governmental educational organization. So
Yeah.
I imagine those years were a little bit difficult.
Well, I kind of discovered it there because I went and taught at a charter school. I was always very independent minded. I didn't want to be in the traditional, normal, public school setting. I wanted to change the dynamic and do something different. And while I was there at the charter school, I was focused on building an engineering and architecture program, because I have this innate desire to build and
Really?
create.
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So you open your own shop, you're
Yeah.
getting out there trying to get business, dialing for dollars, as you said. So
Yeah.
how do you end up coming to the law firm world?
Yeah. And so I started reading a lot of marketing books and I got exposure to a lot of marketing people who were telling me you need to niche. You need to have a specific, to stand out. You've got a niche. So I thought about it, resisted that for a long time. And a lot of law firm owners resist that for time as well.
A lot of business resist it because they feel like they're cutting off a piece of the market.
Yes.
And the reality is it makes your marketing so much easier. You don't have to say no
Yes.
to other people who come to you and want you to be their financial advisor. But when you're putting out messages to a specific market, you're effectively getting in their head and having the conversation with them that they're already having with themselves. So they say, hey, this guy or gal gets me. And really it helps in a significant way. Plus, when you have that depth of expertise, maybe not in your business, but in law firm world, you can charge a premium, right?
Definitely. Yeah. It helps to stand out, number one. But I think you really develop a process. In our world, that's what we did. We developed a process that was really tailored to the law firm owner specifically and what exactly they want and need. And you can just run through the numbers too. If you're concerned about cutting off certain people, okay, there are 3 million lawyers in the US. Half of them are solo and small firm. That's 1.5 million. Let's say 10% of them are doing really, really well. That's 150,000. I will never work with all 150,000. I just need maybe 1% of that. And I have a great business, right? So,
right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the perfect information. So like when you talk about the process, right?
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately that process is what turns into or helps your brand, because that is all about what you deliver in a unique and satisfying way.
Yes, it's your unique ability.
Right.
So what we decided was that we were going to speak to what our clients really need. And the number one objection that I get, why law firm owners don't want to work with me, is because they want to build the business first. That's it. So I said, well, wait a minute. We can do that. We can help our clients build their businesses, right? We can help them with strategy and business planning and all of those things. And it's surprising the number of law firm owners, even really, really high achieving law firm owners, successful law firm owners who don't have any kind of business plan. Maybe they had a business plan a long time ago, but the reality is they're very, very busy. Who has time to sit down and do a business plan? You know what I mean?
I think business plans get a pretty bad reputation because, you think of the ones from the 80s and 90s that were all these thick plans that never came to pass, right? But at the end of the day, the plan can be as little as, and frankly, this is the way we do it. We have a spreadsheet and we look at what are the inbound metrics, what are the outbound metrics, how does this going to work? Are we on track, right?
Yeah. So ours is it's a one-page business plan. We put everything on it. And really there's no magic science behind it. It's just simply where you want to go and breaking that down into small incremental steps. And that is the framework for getting you to where you want to be as a business owner. There are so many distractions that come to us. I know this as a business owner, right? I see this new fancy idea come along and I'm like, ooh, let's try this. And, it happens.
It's just crazy. Yeah. That's one of the things I really counsel law firm owners on is like, you get a whole bunch of opportunities coming your way, right? As soon as you're good at what you do and you're known in the community, there's going to be opportunities coming from all different areas. And the truth, the reality is that you make money when you say no, right? More than when you say
Yeah.
yes. And so you've got to be very careful about what opportunities you accept.
Yes, you do. And for us, our process is so unique and so specific to law firm owners, it wouldn't make sense for anybody else. And so we have to say no to others who come our way or put them in a completely different model. So we've made business planning a part of our financial planning process. And I think that's been really, really powerful. I'll just give you one example. I mean, a lot of law firm owners struggle with the intersection between their personal cash flow and their business cash flow. And that just creates a lot of muddy waters and it holds you back from growing. Right. So if we can come in and we can help clear that up and let's put in a system for your personal cash flow. Let's have a system for your business cash flow so that everything is automated and planned for, then you are going to just be that much more successful.
Where I see that a lot is the issue of a W-2 compensation versus profit, right? So there's no distinction between what should I be getting paid for the labor that I put into my firm, which should be fair market value, right?
100%.
Because you can go anywhere and get that. That's a market rate versus the profit that I'm taking out of the firm. So if you ask some what their profit is, they'll tell you the total compensation that they're getting out of the firm, right? And sometimes if the total compensation is less than their fair market value, they got a real serious problem, but they may not necessarily know it because they say, well, my firm is profitable. Well, not really.
Yeah. Or they're just confused about how much they should be taking in draw and when they should be taking it. And maybe they have a business account which has personal expenses in it. And the other thing I see is that sometimes there's money flowing back and forth between the business and the personal side. The business is running short this month, so we need to throw some money back over there. And I'm like, this is chaos.
So you got a process for lawyers. So tell me a little bit about your philosophy or practice, right? So I think the first thing I would want to know is what's different about working in a financial context with law firm owners.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is the business planning, bringing that in and incorporating that into our financial planning process. That's one of the things that really sets our process apart. The other thing is that we are really, really focused on delivering constant, consistent value to our clients. So we've actually structured the way we work with clients as flat monthly memberships. So you have 4 different tiers, you sign up for a membership level, and you get a very specific list of benefits. So that way you know exactly what you're paying and you know exactly what you're getting for what you're paying. Because in the financial advisor world, there is so much murkiness between what I'm paying, what is that payment for, and so many advisors require you to invest money with them and then charge a fee on those investments. But then it's like, okay, does the $500,000 client get less services than the $1 million client? And how do we, It's just way too confusing. And I find that a lot of law firm owners, because they're very smart people, they are skeptical, and rightly so, of many financial advisors because everybody is competing about market returns. We can do better than the S&P 500. We've got the best investment strategy, blah, 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 blah. Everybody has the same story. And, at the end of the day, they all perform about the same, over time. So it's like, we know this and we feel like our true value is in meeting with our clients on a regular basis, whether that's quarterly or every other month. And we have a consistent delivery process where we are providing a deliverable, a tangible, valuable deliverable every single month. So that could be a tax projection. It could be a Roth conversion analysis. It could be a business planning session, right? So every month there's a very specific deliverable that the clients get. And I think they really like that transparency and that flexibility. And it's no risk, right? Sign up, become a client. You can cancel anytime. It's month to month. I hate places that make you lock in. So why do that? We're not going to do that.
I mean, obviously, attorneys, we're all fiduciaries. We have to be fiduciaries to our clients. I don't know why anybody would want to be anything else, but you're a fiduciary to your client. And so I think that helps people, at least attorneys, understand, hey, you've got my best interest. Right. Whereas maybe if you're a commissioned sales planner, it might be something different, that kind of thing.
Right.
So you said subscription models. So how did you come to the subscription model and how have you found it?
You know what, Ed? It came to me, and I'll tell you why. I had a law firm owner, one of my first clients in this model, reach out to me in California with a civil litigation practice. And he said, I've been following you online and read about you, and I just want to hire you to be my advisor. That's it. I just want to pay you X amount of dollars just to advise me. I was like, huh, well, that's a very interesting concept. And then I had another law firm owner do the same thing. And he was coming to me because he had all of these questions and needed all this help with all these intricate areas of financial planning. But he's like, all my investments are at this big investment firm and I have a personal relationship, so I don't want to disrupt that. And I was like, okay, great. Well, how about $500 a month and I'll be your advisor? You know what I mean?
That's great.
And he was like, okay, sounds good. And at that time, we hadn't really perfected the process, but we've kind of formalized that and created a very specific model around that. So I noticed that people were coming to me wanting this kind of a model. And so we created it.
So, the takeaway here for the law firm owner is that basically, you start to see commonalities in the groups that you're working with and picking the client that you like to work with most, what I would call the client avatar. So kind of the characteristics of that client plus the problem that they have. What problem can you solve for that client? And then taking that and looking at how do we price it in a way that delivers value to the client and also captures value for the firm. So, great, fantastic way to come to a business model. I love it. It's wonderful. So in looking at that and, are you tweaking your model every year, every day? How obviously in the beginning it was tweaked a lot. It starts to settle out.
It does. It does start to settle out after a while. We played around with a lot of different models, trying to figure out, the foundational tier, which is like just the basic package, is probably the most popular. You get all the personal planning stuff, plus a little bit of business planning. And another really cool thing we just added was quarterly group events. So we have a quarterly networking event exclusively for clients so that clients can meet each other because lawyers are interested in networking with other lawyers. Absolutely. And then we added group business planning workshops. There's like, how can we provide business planning and make it accessible to our lower tiers in a way that doesn't require a whole lot of time and effort on our part? And so group events became a part of it. So I would say we are, at this point, it's pretty settled. We'll probably tweak it maybe once a quarter. The only thing we're really playing around with right now is the pricing, trying to see what pricing makes sense in the marketplace. I think we're still on the low end in terms of the value that we're providing in comparison to other advisors. So yeah, at the beginning, it was a lot of tweaking very frequently. I think we're a bit more settled now.
Good. I think the takeaway there is a good, better, best, or in your case, I guess, silver, gold, platinum, diamond. So kind of you have a 4-tier setup. Yeah. The general way that you do this, if you're in the law firm, is you're targeting people to go for the middle range. So you're adding value to the point where the middle range makes the most sense. And then above that, if somebody wants every bell and whistle, then they get the high end piece, and that's the highest profit piece. And then below that is the person who wants to be in relationship with you, but maybe really isn't at the level necessary to get that mid-range product from you. And so it's a great arrangement there. I think it's wonderful. One other thing that is, I think, an important takeaway there is that revenue does not equal profitability, right? So you have systems in place to deliver this process to law firm owners.
Oh, yeah.
You're not every day creating a custom solution for every single law firm owner. And so what you're doing by setting that up is you're setting up a higher level of profitability by reducing the cost to produce the result. Now, the result has the same value to the client, but your improving your standing by really making sure, I mean, really you're doing two things. One is you're reducing your costs, but you're making sure that the client is served best because
Yeah.
there's nothing falling out of the crack, so to speak, to do that.
Right. I would even argue that the value is higher to the client as a result of using, and the laundry list of tools and technologies that we use continues to grow. But it's like, yes, we want to always be, this is part of our core values, is always being on the cutting edge of technology and efficiency. And so we use the best tools out there for investments and tax planning and in everything that we can find. We're like, we want to be using the best stuff. We want to give our clients access to the best software and tools that's out there.
Fantastic. So I have been listening to your podcast. So I love your podcast, The Lawyer Millionaire. And if anybody doesn't have it, they should definitely listen to it. And a couple of episodes, maybe a month or two or three ago, you kind of were talking about the issue of the gap and the retirement planning for lawyers, which I liked. Not that I'm retiring anytime soon, but you got to get ready, right? And I had mentioned to you the book that I love, which is called Die with Zero. And kind of the main pieces of that book are, it's better to experience life now, whatever age you are, than it is to wait to the future to experience life, because your memories are going to be more important to you now, or memories now and your ability to engage in things now is much more important than it will be in your 70s and 80s. And with that, it's also about not oversaving. So they talk in terms of health span rather than lifespan, and looking at it from the standpoint of saving enough, but not too much, right? So in the context of law firm owners, there's a couple of issues that come up specifically around that. And that is, when you're planning for your retirement, you really have to include the biggest asset that you own as part of your asset list for retirement. And what is that? That's typically going to be your law firm, right? More so than your house or probably other investments, although maybe, 401k or something like that. But your biggest single asset is going to be your law firm. And what I hear from lawyers a lot of times is, how can I rely on that? Because it's contingent. I haven't sold it yet. I don't even know what it's worth.
Yeah.
How do you address that?
Yeah, great question. So I think there is some truth in that, just a little bit. In that is, don't rely solely on the sale of your law practice, right? But the sale of your law practice can be a huge contributor to your personal wealth, and all dependent on what steps you take, right? How you position the business and how you set up the business can mean an exponential difference in the amount of money that you could potentially receive from the sale of your law practice. And let's not think of the sale of your law practice as necessarily a one-time event. It could be several sales, right? In terms of bringing on partners or slowly transitioning the firm over to new ownership. And you may never sell the practice entirely. You may remain a 10% owner who is still collecting a dividend check from the law practice down the road. You know what I mean? So I think there's a lot. We call it retirement planning simply because that's the common language, but I find that very few law firm owners are interested in retirement in the old, traditional sense of, okay, I'm going to be done at 65, collect Social Security and get on Medicare, and then, go play golf and enjoy things. I think you really want to balance that. And we encourage our clients, we want to have long-term goals, thinking about the future, but you also need to have goals along the way. It's important to enjoy life along the way. And that's where you can get into a lot of financial misbehavior if you're, like living under a completely strict budget because every dollar is going towards the future. then you might have a tendency to splurge. That's the way our brains work. So we have to really understand that psychology. But your law practice can be a huge contributor to your future wealth. And I think that's more and more becoming the case today. There are a lot of law firm sales happening. And so, what we can actually do is we can look at your law practice as it is, and we can look and compare that to the marketplace, and we can actually give you a reasonable estimation of value in terms of what it could achieve in the market. But I always tell people that is not the most valuable information. The most valuable information is knowing why your law firm is worth what it is, because then that tells you what you might be able to work on to improve that number over time.
Yeah. I always say there are two factors to every law firm value. It's the cash flow that comes out and the risk of that cash flow continuing into the future, right? And so the cash flow that's a mathematical equation. That's super easy,
Yeah.
right? The risk of it continuing into the future is the bigger situation. And it's interesting to me. I think I agree with you. I find people who have businesses, who have law firm businesses, as opposed to law firm jobs, they are more inclined to stay around longer than, your lawyer who's working, they don't really have a practice. They just have a job. Those seem to be more burned out to me than those who have created an actual business. And so, you talked a little bit in the podcast episode that I was referencing a minute ago about kind of those factors, and I like most of those factors. So, maybe we should talk a little bit about that, and then we can move on to the second act, because you raised that issue, and I call it the second act, but I really want to hear your experience about that. So, let's talk about the value drivers that you've seen in law firm transactions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the two biggest, in my opinion, number one, owner independence. How independent is the firm operationally from you? Can
Right.
you take a vacation and things continue to run seamlessly without you? We're talking about the intake. We're talking about the actual client work. Do things continue to run without you being there? That is like numero uno.
Yeah. So there's a paradigm that I learned when I was working with Atticus, which is a lawyer group, right? And the paradigm is kind of the hero, the manager, and the entrepreneur. So if you're a hero, everything relies on you. They come to you for every single thing. They ask you questions. They don't make any decisions on their own. The manager kind of manages everything, but is really involved from a day-to-day perspective. But other people are doing work, but there's the manager. And then there's the entrepreneur level, which is what you're talking about, which is I can go on vacation for 30 days, 60 days, and when I come back, the law firm will either be the same or better than when I left, right? And so really important to get to that level. I couldn't agree more, because either you're an owner or you're a worker, right? Now,
Yes.
I don't want people who are in the position where they are the worker to kind of say, "Oh, I'm going to give up," right? Because it takes a while. You can work in that direction little by little, and every little step you take in that direction will improve both your life today, your earnings today, and will improve your law firm value long term.
100%. You're going to have more money. You're also going to have more time. And that's the beautiful thing. And I want to give some hope to those people who are still, working 10-hour days in their, later career years. Other people have done this successfully. And so that should tell you that this is doable. And all you have to do is follow the steps and make the incremental improvements. It's a daunting, huge task to try to scale your practice and make it independent of you. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen over a quarter. But having little baby steps that move you incrementally towards that direction is how you do it. And that's how we've done it. That's how we continue to do it in our business. And we love teaching that and seeing other people make that progress. So you can do it. Just want to give that hope.
100%. And the thing that is really important is that the early steps you take based on the
Yes.
20-80 rule or 80-20, I always mix the thing up. The early steps you take are going to have bigger impacts than the later steps you take, because the later steps you take, you're kind of pecking at the lower benefit items, whereas in the beginning, you can hit those huge benefit items straight out of the box. So
yes. When I first hired my executive assistant, that was a huge game changer. I mean, and you just do the math. Like I price my time at about $500 an hour just for planning purposes. If I can hire someone who can do great work, and sometimes, here's the really cool secret, sometimes better work than me for $50 an hour, oh, big win, right? And what I found is that you actually become better and more efficient because you get to focus on the stuff that you really love and you're really gung-ho about. There are certain aspects of my business that I am not gung-ho about, right? I do like a podcast like this, and then I need to promote it. I need to get it out there on social media, maybe create some social media assets. I'm not gung-ho about that. That could take me all day. And that would be a huge waste of my time because it's not within my area of expertise. But if I can find somebody who is much more efficient and better at that and costs less to do that, yes, all day.
So Dan Martell has this book called Buy Back Your Time, which I would recommend.
Love it.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and thinking about what to do first, get that book. That's what you need to do, is get that book and read it. And it's interesting because he talks about growing not from the standpoint of, in a law firm, I'm going to add another attorney or I'm going to add a paralegal. It's what do I not want to do and get off my desk that I can give to somebody else. Hire that person and allow yourself then to do the higher value work. Okay, so we got off on a little tangent there.
That's okay.
Let's go back to value drivers. So the first value driver was law firm owner independence.
Yeah. The second one I think is really huge. This is for any business, but it carries over to law firms. I think is recurring revenue. If you can create subscription models, right? And if they're contractual, even better, but having some kind of recurring revenue model. It doesn't have to be your only revenue model, right? So you don't have to change your entire practice to be a subscription-based recurring revenue system. But if you can create some kind of recurring revenue model within your business, that is a huge driver of value, because you talk about the risk, right? We're decreasing the risk.
Right. So that consistent cash flow is crucial. I mean, estate planners are pretty good at doing this because they'll put people on a continuity program or something along those lines. And so what I would add to that, though, is I think that in those kinds of practice areas where there are very few, if any, repeat clients, so it's a one and done type situation, maybe a personal injury firm, family law, hopefully, although there's some back end to the family law, right? Or maybe bankruptcy or something like that. I would substitute that recurring revenue for a marketing system that doesn't involve the lawyer. So this kind of automatic method of generating clients, which turn into revenue.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I encourage my clients to think creatively, right? If you're a personal injury attorney, yes, your primary mode of revenue is you get a case, you win the case, you get a settlement. So recurring revenue may not be a fit there, but maybe we can think a little bit more creatively. Maybe there's a service we can offer our clients that is auxiliary to what we're doing. It's related to what we're doing. It's not necessarily the practice of law, but it is something that we could incorporate into our business model. So don't be afraid to think outside the box and think, if you're a business attorney, maybe you can do business coaching and business advisory. And that's an easy one, right, to think of. Okay, so how do we apply that concept to other areas of practice and think about almost a side gig for your law firm.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of growing that revenue. The way I think about that is the issue of taking the relationship you already have with the client, which has value,
Yeah.
and then leveraging that relationship so that you create additional value for the client and you capture additional value from that client. And so if you have that, then that can also substitute for the subscription. So that's a great point. Okay. So recurring revenue. What else?
So the other things that I like to think of all relate to what we call the 4 C's of your intangible capital and strengthening those areas. The stronger those areas are, the less risk there is in those areas, the more value your business is going to have. So human capital would be one of those areas. How strong is your human capital? How good are your people? What's the risk level there for one of them leaving? How big of an impact is that going to be in your practice? Your structural capital, your systems, having a marketing system, having some sort of intake system that is automated, that just runs on its own, a consistent flow of leads, that is really, really huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. The others are your social capital, which is your goodwill in the community. If you have a really great website, if you have really great reputation in the community, those things have really, really strong value. So thinking about those are all your intangible capitals, your intangible sources of value. And surprisingly, 85% of a business's value is derived from its intangible capital. So those are some areas to focus on to drive that value higher.
I love that quote because if you look at the S&P 500, that's actually where you get the 85% number. Our economy has changed so much in my lifetime because in the beginning, it would have been all based on industrial and assets and tangible assets and equipment and things of that nature. So
Right.
It's fascinating to me. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people haven't caught up to that, but you can see it, right? That really it is all driven by what I would call goodwill. And so in moving that goodwill to a buyer for your firm, you've got to be focused on how do we make that transition? And that's, again, reducing the risk to make sure that the cash flow continues into the future.
Right. One of those areas for law firms I notice is kind of specific. So many law firms are titled or named after the owner. The law firm of so and so, and so and so. And there's a risk there in terms of your branding, because if you retire or transition, likely the name is going to need to change. Now, what I would advocate for is creating something a little bit more marketable. And not every jurisdiction allows trade names, but if you can have a trade name, fantastic. If you could be Toledo Family Attorneys, yes, that's what we want. We want something like that that's going to be non-specific to you. And then, because then what you can do is you can work on tying the loyalty of the clients to the firm as an entity and less so to you as an individual.
Yeah. So for those of you who have a firm that's already named that way, and you're not going to make that change, the really big area there is to practice for the client in a team approach, right? And
yes,
and when you do that, then you really do spread the goodwill away from you and onto the employees.
Yeah.
And the other piece about the naming issue is that you should expect that if you sell, you're going to be of counsel with the buyer. And you may not be of counsel in the sense that you're working on matters for the buyer, unless that's the deal that you strike, but generally that's not. But you're of counsel so that you could be listed on the letterhead as of counsel and that your name can continue to be used in the firm of the buyer going forward, because you're basically a retiring lawyer at that point in time. And so you got to be careful because various jurisdictions have different rules on that, but many jurisdictions will allow that. So that's something to keep in mind.
As we're thinking about all these things, you should do all of these things, not just for the purpose of selling your practice, but just to number one, have more profitability. And number two, enjoy what you're doing and free up more time for yourself. All of these steps, the steps that you go through to make your business more sellable or more transferable, are going to drive value higher, but they're also going to drive revenue and profit higher. And they're going to give you more free time. So all of this should be a process that every law firm is focused on and thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I always say that businesses pay their owners in two ways, right? So there's present income, and then there's this future value that you're creating. And there's not many investments where you can take out a lot of money out of it, and that translates into more value for the business, right? So it's a really great opportunity. Did you have any other value drivers you wanted to talk about?
That's all I can think of off the top of my head. Ed, what are some that you notice that are maybe different?
Well, I think you've hit on a lot of them. The thing that I would say is the relationship piece of outsiders, so referral sources. And
Yeah.
making sure that referral sources understand it's a team event. It's not just Billy Bob Lawyer or Jane Lawyer who's doing the work. It's our team. Because
Yes.
if you're getting referrals as a primary way, and frankly, a lot of lawyers do that, and most lawyers, I would say, do that because those tend to be the best cases. That managing that relationship transfer is crucial to maintaining value. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And then you also continue to reduce that risk component. And what we learned from the EPI is de-risking is the first step. It's not sexy, but it really is where you can, that 80-20 thing, the steps you take there make just a huge impact on the operation of your firm and the value of your firm. So anything that you can do to de-risk the operations. And when you have that team approach, if one member of the team is not available, or let's say one member of the team decides to go start their own firm, right? And become your competitor. If you have that team approach in place, then there's little risk to your organization.
it's a huge issue for attorneys who are hiring, associates, worrying about the associate going off and starting their own firm. And if you're truly doing a team approach and they're just one of the people dealing with your clients, then that risk is significantly reduced.
Yeah, that's a big one. I talked with some prospective clients recently who that was their objection to hiring. They said, well, I'm just training my competition. I'm just bringing people on and training them to be competitors. And so then we need to think strategically about how do we get people to stay, right? The retention of your employees, that's another value driver, right? But really the key there is your mission, having a common sense of mission, having a common sense of team. If you have a vision that everybody can buy into, that's inspiring and motivating, people will want to stay. If you have an environment that's supportive and collaborative, people will want to stay. So it's not always about compensation. I do have to pay people well. Mm-hmm. And I've been reading Mike Morse's book, Fireproof, and he says, we hire the best and we pay the best. So you want the best people and you want them to stick around, you got to be willing to pay them.
Right.
But there's a lot more to it in terms of how you have built a community in your organization.
Great. Okay, so in your discussion about retirement, you mentioned the idea of traditional view versus the kind of new view of retirement. I said I kind of call that the second act. And
yes.
So, in the context of working in a law firm, if you want to be a semi-retired owner, right, in order to get to that point without destroying value, you've got to have an operating business. So talk a little bit about what you've seen there for people who want to remain semi-employed and how they maintain value.
Great question. So, you could, as we mentioned before, kind of sell the firm in bits and pieces and remain a partial owner. I've seen a lot of people make this kind of transformation where they move from manager to CEO. And then they hire a manager and they become the CEO. And then they hire a CEO and they become the owner. And you may think, well, what is the owner doing? Well, the owner is actually really, really important at that stage, because at that stage, the owner is keeping everybody accountable and is setting the vision. And that's a really big responsibility. So, I love Dan Martell's replacement ladder, slowly moving yourself up that ladder into leadership, and then eventually delegating the actual leadership of the firm. So it could be a place where you have a leadership team in place. You have a CEO, you have a CFO to handle the numbers. Maybe you have a CLO, or a chief legal officer, who's in charge of the legal operations and overseeing that. But you have kind of delegated a lot of these responsibilities. So marketing, you have a marketing team in place doing that. Sales and intake, you've got attorneys who are trained in sales doing sales work. You have an intake team doing the intake process. And at that point, you are more the visionary for the firm. And there could be a great combination. Gino Wickman's book, Rocket Fuel, you have the visionary and you have the integrator. That's right. And you maybe become the visionary, or maybe you want to be the integrator, right? So I've seen it go the other way too, where maybe somebody wants to actually really enjoys the practice of law. That's where you want to stay. You want to delegate the leadership aspects. You want to still be an owner, but you want to, work on cases and maybe on a more flexible schedule, maybe not as such a breakneck schedule, but you want to continue going into the courtroom and arguing cases in front of a judge because you just really love that. And that's okay. So you need to find the aspects of your practice that you really enjoy. And those are the areas that you're going to focus on, and you're going to delegate everything else as much as possible.
Replace yourself for the others. So I think it's Dan Martell's book, but he does the 10-80-10 rule, right? Where you do the first 10%, you delegate the 80%, and then you do the last 10%, right? So you kind of show up and be the hero with the client. Yeah. So that's an option. Now, if to get to the level of doing a CEO or being CEO, and then maybe doing the visionary thing, I mean, you've got to have certainly 7 figures. I mean, I don't think you can get to be what you would consider a CEO of the firm unless the firm was generating about $1.5 million a year. And then to get to that other structure, you've got to get higher. So for those who aren't really looking to build a firm to that level, because the vast majority of law firms in the United States are below $2 million in revenue. The vast majority of those solo and small firms that we were talking about earlier are below that number. And so what I don't want to necessarily do is overwhelm anybody who's looking at this saying, oh my God, I got to grow my firm. There is a way to do it where you can, as you said, keep what you love and then offload the things that aren't your best work, or you just don't. You can do well, but you don't like.
You could be just a firm that is marketing. You could be marketing really well, and you could be referring work out to a select number of really trusted lawyers. So then you're getting a cut of the work that's being done because you are the originator. You're bringing the clients in, but you're not doing the work, right? So it could be a setup like that. And another thing is that there are a lot of recent law school graduates in today's generation that are really interested in owning and running a law practice. And so there are a lot of new attorneys that are looking to buy firms, small practices, you know what I mean? And what that would look like is bringing someone in, who's going to they could be an apprentice, some sort of apprentice relationship where they're going to take on a lot of that task work, a lot of that client work for you, free up a lot of your time, and then maybe eventually down the road take over completely.
So great plan. Couple of things to keep in mind is some of the jurisdictions, when you're advertising or marketing for work that you don't intend to actually take, they require specific, disclosures and things like that. So just be aware of that. Check your firm rules or your bar rules. And then the other part of that is when you're bringing somebody on like that, one thing to just be aware of is that there's a fine line there between you've got to interview that person and make sure they have the ability to actually run a business, right? Especially if they've never run one before. And can you train them to run your firm? And then we want to be sure to document that expectation around the buyout when really early on in the relationship, because I've seen some disasters where people come in and they say they want to buy, and then what ends up happening is, they have a completely different expectation about what price is or what terms are. Yeah. I've even seen where the person coming on thought they were going to be gifted the firm, which is just shocking to me, but it happens. So, yeah.
Yeah, there is a lot of risk there potentially. And one of the things also is that life changes, right? So someone may be young, may come and join your practice and intending to buy it in the future, but they're young and they got a lot of life to live. And things may happen. They may meet someone they really like in a whole nother city and, decide, I've decided to change direction here.
Right. I tell law firm owners that if they're looking to do an internal transfer, so they've got an associate or maybe they're bringing on an associate with the intent of that, the sweet spot is 37 to 50. Because by 37, their life is settled down to some extent. They've got the home. They know how to practice. They probably have one or two kids. That things are, a little bit normalized, and it gives them then the time to come in and learn this. And they're young enough and interested enough to continue to learn it. Beyond about 50 or 55, that person's thinking about their own retirement. So I think to some extent, that might be the window is closed or closing very quickly on that side. So there is a real window of opportunity there. So just keep that in mind as well. Well, good.
I think that's great. I want to add one more, and we call it merger and practice continuation. And that is where if you have a small practice, maybe you're a solo, you sell to a much bigger practice. And basically you bring your clients over to that practice. You become an of counsel with that firm. You're going to continue to work with your clients in a reduced capacity while, delegating and offloading client work to attorneys at the new firm. So you get to sell your practice, you still get some income, and maybe you get to work less. So that could be a very attractive option for some of those smaller practices.
That works fantastically in the litigation realm, where you have a cadre of either large clients who have a lot of litigation, or you have a niche of clients. So if, all your clients are, pediatrician offices, or I don't know, I'm just making something up here, but then that represents a real opportunity for the larger firm, because now they can instantaneously have a niche right there. And then they can leverage their other practice areas into that niche, like estate planning, that type of thing. So that is a great opportunity for lawyers. It's, like I say, especially in the litigation space. So good. Excellent. Well, Darren, it's been a pleasure talking to you. So tell the group how they could get in touch with you. Obviously, we got the Lawyer Millionaire podcast, but other than that, how else can we get in touch with you?
Well, we're on all the social media platforms, so search for us wherever you are. But it's really, really simple. Just go to thelawyermillionaire.com, and all of our stuff is there, the podcast, the book. And if you want to schedule some time to chat with me, you can do that there as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Darren. Great talking to you. And I look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ed.